So as we all know, yesterday Ryan Sparks, Stephen Gent and Graham Alexander all participated in a fans forum, which was basically just an interview with BBC Radio Leeds, and I didn't actually listen to it yesterday. I was just so fed up and bored of this football club that I thought I'm not even going to be bothered. We all know what sort of nonsense is going to come out. We know that the questions are going to get kind of just spun into Ryan Sparks talking about how great he is, and I decided that I just wasn't going to bother. I was playing Football Manager at the time, and that was far more enjoyable. But today, we're here for a two-part video to react to the entire fans forum. It's 55 minutes and 46 seconds long. In this first video, we'll get through around 25-30 minutes, and then in the second video, which will be coming out pretty much as soon as this one comes out, then obviously we'll go through the remaining parts of it and all that sort of stuff. The reason why this is on the second channel rather than the main channel is because long form content never really does very well on YouTube, and I don't want to kill the views on the channel ahead of a big game against Wrexham at the weekend. But make sure to drop a like on there for me, get your thoughts in it down in the comment section down below. It's going to be a long one, so please bear with me and let's get into it. So here we are then on the BBC Sounds website, and today it's going to be more like a podcast sort of thing. I'm going to try and keep it as raw and uncut as possible. We're just going to listen through, pause at any opportunity that I feel like I need to add a comment on, and then you can get your thoughts in it down in the comment section down below. Like I say, it is going to be a bit of a longer form content, so make sure to go grab a drink or something like that while you sit back and watch it. Obviously, I'm sure you will have all seen it anyway, but this is just my thoughts and reaction to it. So let's get into it. I think the first couple of seconds or so is just kind of an introduction to it. Hopefully it's not too loud, too quiet. I will turn it up once you start talking, and I guess let's sit back and enjoy.
Daily special here on BBC Radio Leeds this evening with myself, Jamie Rayner.
One thing I would say as well, it's disappointing that there's only very, very few clips that you can see of like an actual video of the interview, unfortunately, which is disappointing because I feel like sometimes body language can tell you more than actual words that are being said by certain people. But yeah, that's the only slight disappointment that I've got with this, obviously, apart from no fans actually being there.
A Bradford City fans forum. Joining us in our studio tonight are three of the key decision makers at the football club. First team manager Graham Alexander, chief executive Ryan Sparks, and head of recruitment Stephen Gent.
One thing as well, when this got announced, and I'm sure some other people have already made these comments, I don't really understand why Graham Alexander was there. He didn't need to be there. This fans forum was needed because the fans needed an update on all the off-the-field problems that we've got, including the recruitment, which is why Stephen Gent's there, and all the other things, which is why Ryan Sparks there. I don't think this fans forum was needed to really talk about the team on the pitch. I think there's a question in here about corners at some point as well. I don't think that was really a needed question in a fans forum, which was this important.
Your questions over the next hour, with the club sitting 18th in the League 2 table, 7 points off the playoff places. We'll aim to cover some of the key topics such as recruitment, strategy, ownership and finances, to name but a few. So let's get straight into it. A Bradford City fans forum on West Yorkshire Sport Daily for your Wednesday evening.
Here we go then.
4 minutes past 6, Wednesday's West Yorkshire Sport.
So we started a little bit late as well.
Bradford City fans forum on BBC Radio Leeds between now and 7 o'clock. Thank you so much for your company, and first and foremost, thank you to all three of you for taking the time to come into our studios tonight. Look, it's not often that you get the manager, the chief executive and the head of recruitment all in the same room taking questions from the fans, so look, it's really appreciated. I think it's fair to say there's probably been quite a bit of frustration built up across the fan base over the time frame of this season, and there have been calls for greater transparency from the club, particularly off the field. So hopefully this hour helps address some of those frustrations. So much so, actually, that since we announced we were doing tonight's forum last Friday, we've had over 250 questions submitted. So a huge thank you to all of you that got in touch. As you can probably imagine, there's simply no way that we're going to be able to ask every single one of those. A lot of questions have been of a similar nature, so hopefully the answers you hear tonight cover the question that you asked in particular, and we apologise to the people whose questions aren't read out this evening. And just to be absolutely clear, for the avoidance of any doubt, these questions have not been vetted. The three of you in front of me now haven't seen the questions prior to coming on air tonight. Quite simply, that's not how we operate here at BBC Radio Leeds.
That's obviously a positive thing. I think when the fans forum got announced, there was maybe some concerns, obviously, with it not being in person, that the club would be able to pick and choose which questions were going to be asked, and it was kind of just going to be a little bit of a waste of time. From what I've seen on social media, it hasn't particularly gone down well, has this fans forum. I would say that the club needed this massively to get the fans back on side, and from what I've seen, there is a lot of people who have been season ticket holders for 20, 30, 40 years now who are saying they're not going to bother next season, and that is massive alarm bells for the football club. So I'm interested to see here in a lot more detail about what the club actually had to say, because obviously some things get misinterpreted and all that sort of stuff, and I might even do that myself. But yeah, let's press continue.
Of transparency along with fair accountability. So I'm going to kick things off with yourself, Ryan Sparks, Chief Executive of the football club. With Bradford City sitting 18th as we speak in the table, how do you assess the season overall?
Well, so far, in terms of the league, it's been disappointing. We are undoubtedly not where we wanted to be. We've still got some weeks and months ahead to try and put that right. I think we showed a real good run of form in December, and we got a lot closer to the playoffs than we currently are. It's not an insurmountable gap to the playoffs, and there are a lot of teams who aren't exactly high on the points per game tally at league table, just like ourselves at the moment. But
see, the thing is, League 2 is always really close and really tight, but when you're not winning football matches, that gap to the playoffs is a million miles away, because we haven't won still in the league since before Christmas. Like, you're not going to achieve the playoffs if you go 6 weeks in the league without winning. What are we, 7 or 8 games now without winning the league? It's simply not good enough.
I think we've tried to be effective in January, sharpen the squad, add goals where we were clearly short.
Add goals? Did we really add goals in January? Tyreek Wright barely kicked a ball this season. Callum Kavanagh, 2 senior goals, I think, at the League 2 level, maybe 3. And then a goalkeeper. Did we really recruit goals in January? I would certainly beg to differ. That obviously we recalled Jake Young, but that doesn't really count, does it?
And we're hoping that from here on we're going to climb the table and pick up results. Frustrating is a good word. I think we're frustrated, definitely. I share that, definitely, with the supporters. I feel it just like you guys at home.
Recruitment's obviously a big topic. Stephen, we're so pleased to have you in the studio this evening.
One thing I would say before we get onto this, have we heard from Stephen Gent? We might have had maybe one interview when he got appointed as head of recruitment. Since then, we've not really had much from him, so it'll be actually nice to hear from him, and hopefully he finally gives us some answers as to why we've signed players such as Matt Derbyshire, Ash Taylor, Thierry Nevers, Dara Costello. The list goes on, really, doesn't it?
There's been a lot of questions in regards to the summer recruitment, the January recruitment. A similar question in regards to Ryan's assessment of the season as a whole. How would you assess the recruitment side of things at Bradford City?
Mixed, if I'm honest. I think we've got some right, and some haven't worked out as well as what we thought.
So you see, the thing is, he said there that from this season we've got some right. I look at the list of players that we've signed. Have many of them really worked out? And were many of them on paper good signings? I would beg to differ that we've had some that have worked out so far this season. I think it's maybe 1, 2 maximum.
Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but all we can do, is I look at things objectively, and we look back at, why hasn't it worked out, and obviously moving forward we learn from it, and hopefully we're not in we don't make them. If you want, I don't like saying it's a mistake, because I don't think things are mistakes. It's just they haven't panned out to the way we would have liked with certain players.
When you look at things
Before we continue there, so he's on about mistakes and hindsight and all that sort of stuff. Ash Taylor on paper was never ever the right signing for Bradford City. We, under Mark Hughes, which is when Ash Taylor was signed, were a team that played out from the back, were a ball-playing team. We signed Ash Taylor, who can barely control his own legs without falling over. Like, that man turns like Bambi on ice. He was never, ever the right recruit, and anybody could have told you that with a pair of eyes. It doesn't need someone with the name or job title head of recruitment to tell you that, and it somehow got passed off by all these people. And Ash Taylor's not the only one. There's a number of other players as well, but I'm using him as an example where it's so glaringly obvious that signing was not going to work out. Even under Alexander, where the style of play is suited much more to Ash Taylor, he's proven that he's just far too slow to play at this level.
Stephen, and we'll get into some of the fans' questions in due course, but just finally on my front, when you look at things objectively, where do you think things could have gone better when it comes to recruitment?
I think probably more of what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of we had a process at the start of the summer, and we were building towards a certain formation and a certain playing style.
That'd be in the back three.
And then towards the back of that
he's saying there though that we're building towards a certain playing style. So again, I come back to Ash Taylor, the complete opposite of a ball playing centre half. That completely doesn't make sense.
Suddenly changed, and then we had to react off the back of that.
So it's Matt Hughes' fault,
and obviously now, we've changed the manager within the time, before obviously the January window. And then we're looking at that, different profiles of players to suit what Graham and Chris want. So it's mixed, so to speak. But I felt we addressed some of it, in January, moving forward, obviously for this summer coming. And we can.
We only made 2 permanent signings in January, so how have we made improvements going into the summer? That doesn't make sense. We only made the 2 permanent signings, and one of them is a 33-year-old goalkeeper. I think Kavanagh could be a decent player. We certainly brought some pace in January, but Tyreek Wright is not here for the long term, so I'd very much disagree with that from Stephen Gent.
We'll obviously be looking at, and progressing, throughout towards the summer as well.
We'll delve into that topic deeper as the hour progresses. A lot of those points that you've raised there fall under the category of overall vision, strategy, recruitment. It all overlaps one another. But to include all 3 of you, Graham, a good evening to you as well. Yeah. 3 months now in the role as Bradford City manager. How does it compare 3 months into what your initial expectations were?
I came into the job with an open mind, really, to assess as quick as possible where the team needed to improve, where the club needs to improve from a football perspective, because that's my role, that's my responsibility, and but while doing that, try and win games. And that's the pretty much the job most of the places. But there was, I think I know what the team is capable of. The squad, less so, because I was pretty consistent with the team for the first 10-11 games. I think results justified that. So I'm not a guy for chopping and changing for no reason. I want players to have that capability of keeping their shirt. But there was an element where we had to rotate the team after Christmas and into January. And then we're into the window where we're looking to how we can improve any factors that are holding us back. And that's what we've tried to do. So there's things that I see that we need to improve that can be done right now, and there's things that will take a bit of time. So it's about prioritising what we can do right now with the plan in place to make those improvements when the time's right, or when the time is actually possible to do that. So it's very difficult in season to do all of it, and you don't want to be too disruptive. But I think what we've tried to do is implement certain things that I felt needed. And listen, every manager will have their opinions and ideas on how it should be done, and I'm no different to that. So, but I always go in with an open mind about what I'm going to find, because sometimes you learn more that way from what's going on. Sometimes you keep things that going because they are working well. My job is to see issues and then find solutions for those issues.
I just wanted to let Alexander finish there before I cut in, but I think Alexander, as always, speaks really, really well there. Stephen Gent, I think, from what I've seen so far, speaks very poorly. Obviously Alexander is much more used to these interviews, but Stephen Gent was just going, I think, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, that is a man who doesn't sound very confident in even his own answers, where Alexander, while on the pitch hasn't exactly been great over the last couple of weeks, and maybe probably last 6 weeks or so, I feel like he still always talks well, and I'm still on board with Graham Alexander for now. Do I think he's the right man long term? I'm not so sure, but I'm on board with him because I feel like he has kind of got his hands tied behind his back a little bit.
As I say, north of 250 questions submitted for this fans forum, a Bradford City fans forum here on BBC Radio Leeds. So let's get straight into those questions. Ryan, I'll come to you first. This is from David Mann, and the sentiment was echoed by Jay White, Andy Zabo, Dave Evans, Matthew Knott. The question from David is, Successful businesses, including in sports, have a clear ethos, vision and strategic plan. Given our vision must be promotion, what is your ethos and strategy for its achievement? Do the facts that the club owns neither the ground or training facilities make this more difficult?
Well, I think there's a few parts to that question, so I'll try and address it in as many ways as I can. The stadium and the training ground are challenges, but they're not issues. They are issues, I guess, but I see them as challenges that you can overcome.
I mean, in literally 6 seconds there, he's contradicted himself 3 times. They're not issues, they're challenges, but they're not, but they are. I mean, how does anybody still support this man? Like, he's 6 seconds there and he's contradicted himself 3 times.
We all know how much it costs to play at Valley Parade, and we all know that some of the stadium can offer some limitations in terms of set space around it and whatnot. And the training ground isn't ours. But I've personally not had a manager in the building at Bradford who's had a problem with the training ground, so I don't think that's been an issue.
See, maybe the manager's not going to come to the CEO, but Graham Alexander came out a couple of weeks ago and said that they've been kicked off the AstroTurf by the school. For those who don't know, maybe aren't Bradford City fans, we share with the school, and obviously when it's bad weather, we train on the AstroTurf, and Alexander came out and said that they've been kicked off of the AstroTurf by the school, so they didn't have anywhere to train. That is a professional football club, and while current managers might not have criticised the facilities, Simon Grayson did a couple of years ago in 2018, I think it was, so it's might not be necessarily a big issue, but it would certainly be much easier and better for the managers if we had our own training facility, which is private and separate away from a school.
For sure, if you own your own facilities, there's more scope as to what you can do with them. Valley Parade really has been the same, if you want to call it an issue or a challenge, it's been the same issue and challenge since 2001 for Bradford City. The club has not owned the ground for a long time. Since that 2001-2002 period, and it's something that I can't control and don't have the means to control it, so you work with it. Our strategy to be successful on the pitch hasn't changed. In fact, it's enhanced over recent years. I set out at the start with a clear mandate from the ownership, which was to keep Bradford City in the Football League and don't go bust. That was.
See, now that is a quote that I've seen a lot on social media. Don't get relegated and don't go bust. What sort of a strategy is that? Why would fans continue to spend their hard-earned money on season tickets, shirts, things like that, merchandise, if the strategy at the football club is just to not get relegated out of the basement division and hope that we don't go bust? I mean, goodness me, talk about setting the standard right at the bottom of the barrel. No wonder we're massively underachieving when the strategy is to not get relegated and not go out of extinction.
Was the mandate I was given. I felt, and I know it's a phrase that's put back at me quite a lot about when I talked about there's no place for mediocrity at the club. I absolutely stand by that. Because
so wait, let me just go. I can't exactly go back a little bit. Can we go back just maybe 5 seconds or so just to listen to that again?
From the ownership, which was to keep Bradford City in the Football League and don't go bust. That was the mandate I was given. I felt, and I know it's a phrase that's put back at me quite a lot about when I talked about there's no place for mediocrity at the club.
So he said that it's thrown back at him quite a lot, but I don't really understand how he would know that if he's a man who's not on social media. I mean, I doubt there's hundreds or thousands of people emailing him saying there's no room for mediocrity. So that's all I'm going to say.
I absolutely stand by that because I thought that was quite a mediocre list of instructions. Stay up.
That is less than mediocre. Bradford City trying to finish 89th or higher out of 92 is not even mediocre. That is pathetic. That's what that is. That's not mediocre. That is pathetic.
Don't go bust. That's like a baseline. So I've got no issue with, and
I would agree it's a baseline.
Only way we could compete on the pitch, and you look at some of the wage bills in this division now. Average wage bill 2.3 million. It's excessive. When I started, it was 1.6. It's only 2 or 3 years ago now.
So what he's basically saying is because we failed so much over the last couple of seasons, there's now clubs with more money to spend than us, and we can't compete because our owner doesn't invest a penny. Brilliant. So more positive things to get behind.
I knew we had to increase turnover. I knew we had to be better from a player trading perspective, commercial perspective, the stadium had to be better for our facilities had to be better to give us more revenue, and we've achieved that, and it's allowed us to be competitive. We wouldn't be able to go into the market. We wouldn't be able to keep players like Jake Young in January if we weren't in the position we're in, and that's credit to a number of people off the field that actually, if we're being honest, I feel let down. I feel like we as a club let those down last year. Supporters won, and my staff too, because they deserve their day in the sun, and they might get it this year.
We are not going to get our day in the sun when we're currently 18th in the league and we haven't won since before Christmas. And our day in the sun is not getting promoted into League One. It's fighting for promotion into the Championship, if not higher. Getting promoted out of League Two is the absolute minimum, and it should have been done for the last 4 years. But it hasn't done because we're constantly failing on and off the pitch.
But, for sure, they are the vision for our football club is absolutely clear. Is to remain sustainable. That is what I have been tasked to do. Keep this business alive.
See, that is, while I appreciate his honesty, it's so disappointing and frustrating that Stefan Rupp is happy for us just to continue being a League Two football club season after season as long as we're sustainable. But the fans are just not going to put up with this. I mean, I genuinely really do fear for season ticket sales next season. After this fans forum, from what I've seen on social media, from the amount of people that have signed up to the Bradford City fans independent group as well, I think they're approaching 900 now as well, which is absolutely incredible. That is a hell of a lot. And the amount of people saying that they're not renewing their season ticket next season. I genuinely believe the club will be lucky to get 8,000 or 9,000 season ticket holders next season. I think you're looking at attendances around 10,000 every week because of what has been going on at the club over the last couple of years, and interviews like this. He did an interview, Ryan Sparks, with Simon Parker, and that told us pretty much nothing. It was pretty much a waste of time. This one so far, it's gone poorly. I must admit, it is going very poorly.
It's sustainable. It is sustainable.
Absolutely, yeah. We're in a position where, through the development of the academy, we're able to trade players that can provide cash to the bottom line to keep us as near to a break-even position as I can possibly get it. You look at some of the financial performances of clubs, not only in this league, but across the EFL and the National League, and we're not in the bracket of being a club that has financial massive losses to report. And that, at times, it's frustrating, because, of course, you've got to keep, that is my number one priority, is to look after this football club. And I've got to keep us in a position where we're not financially at risk, while trying to compete with some clubs in this division that are able to spend maybe 1.5 million more than we can on wages, and we spend a good amount of money on them. So, for me...
Hold on, didn't he say that literally like 2 minutes ago? He said something about the highest is around 2.3 million and ours is around 1.6 million. Or have I got that wrong? Or did he say the average was 1.6 million, it's now 2.3? I might have got that one wrong, so maybe ignore me there.
I can only speak for my staff off the field and the staff on the field. The absolute clarity from the top down as to how we run and where we run. And for sure, 100% 18th in the league is not part of that strategy. I think that's fairly clear. I'm absolutely not happy with that. We all know that, but all three of us sat here tonight know that. And we work every single day to make sure that's not where we finish.
I take your point on the mediocrity comment, and as you can imagine, that was a big point of discussion for fans that have got in touch. Jonathan Lonsdale comes forward with this question. Chris Joyce did the same. John Tam, Jonathan Lonsdale, Philip Woodford says, a difficult question for Ryan. In one of your first interviews, you commented that there would be no more room for mediocrity. On reflection, do you consider this to have been a naive statement? And how would you describe your performance as CEO since you were appointed to that position? I appreciate, he says, it's not the most pleasant thing to raise. And just to add to that,
that's no problem.
With the mandate that you've explained there, and you felt that was a mediocre mandate to maybe have to deal with, but when you look at league position since you've made that statement, the average league position of Bradford City has been 12th, including the 18th position right now. That is mediocre.
Yeah, but we've made the playoffs for the first time in 6 years last season.
See, now that is a clip that has done the rounds on social media. I'm pretty sure BBC Radio Leeds actually posted that, or West Yorkshire Sport maybe, on social media, and that response to that question is exactly the reason why this football club is failing. Celebrating reaching the playoff semi-finals where we were piss poor in both legs. Like, we won the Champions League is embarrassing. Getting to the playoffs was a failure because we failed to get promoted. Any season where Bradford City is not getting promoted out of League Two, it is a failure. So why are we celebrating making the playoffs like it's some amazing achievement? We had a striker score 31 goals and we scraped a 6th place finish on the final day because Leyton Orient felt a little bit sorry for us. Harry Lewis was outstanding last season. He was a big part of that success. It's not like we had I'm not saying, spending money necessarily means that you're going to definitely get promoted, but it certainly helps. It's not like we spent loads of money, we played some unbelievable football. A lot of the games are very boring, and Andy Cook could come up with some sort of unbelievable goal, but the fact that he celebrates getting to the playoffs like it's an amazing achievement is just so disappointing, and that is mediocre. That is literally the definition of mediocre. I think that's a brilliant question from Jamie Rayner there, but celebrating just getting to a playoff semi-final and throwing it away in the way that we did is just so unforgivable. Getting to the playoffs is not an achievement, or certainly not as much an achievement as how much Ryan Sparks bangs on about it.
We've spent the most we've ever spent on player wages. The turnover is the highest it's been in the club's history outside of the top division. And when I felt mediocrity had come into the business, I've dealt with it. When we've been in a position where we've slipped away or we've not had an acceptable start, I felt I've taken action at the right times while trying to support the people that I've potentially taken some of the action against. Perhaps to my detriment, but I've done my best for the football club.
This was something that, again, he did, I think, an interview with ITV where he was trying to play like the victim sort of card, perhaps to my detriment. You are the CEO, you are the main figure there on a daily basis that all the staff should be looking up to. Of course, you're meant to be the one to take all the flack. You are the CEO, you are the main man, because obviously, well, technically it's Stefan Rupp, but he's basically doesn't exist, does he? He might as well not bother. So Ryan Sparks is at the top of the pyramid. He has to be the one to take the stick. That's just how businesses work, because we are described as a business and not as a football club.
I still think we can get out of this season with something. We have cup and league opportunities in front of us. I'd love us to get to Wembley this season. I'd love us to get there twice. But of course, we all know what's there for us in the cup. And I want to give our supporters a day out that they probably deserved last season. So,
even if we won the AFL trophy, I would much rather have a 3% chance of getting promoted this season than winning the AFL trophy. Winning the AFL trophy, in contrast to getting promoted, they're basically incomparable. It's not like it's the FA Cup, it's the EFL trophy, which 99.9% of fans couldn't really care about. It's just an opportunity to play in a big stadium and maybe win a trophy that no one will care about in 3 years' time, if that. Promotion is the absolute number one aim. I would have genuinely rather we got knocked out in the EFL trophy first round or in the group stages, because we don't ever see any of this money that we've got from the prize money. You can tell by what happened in January. We've not seen the Harry Lewis money really. I doubt we really spent much money on Callum Kavanagh, or at least I hope we haven't. Any more than 50 grand for Callum Kavanagh would be crazy, considering he scored 2 or 3 professional goals in his career.
I am absolutely determined to bring success to the football club, and I make no excuses.
I make no excuses.
At the time when I said what I said, I meant it, because I perhaps should have expanded on the point, what I meant by it. I'd been given a mandate to keep Bradford City Football Club in the EFL. I thought that was mediocre, so I said it. Perhaps I shouldn't. I didn't say it for any other reason than that. And everything I do every time I walk into the stadium is designed to make us better. And when you're increasing your operational turnover by close to 45%, I don't think that's poor. And I know how hard that is to do at Bradford City.
I'll tell you what is poor though, Ryan Sparks. Our average league position in the table since you took over is 12th. That is poor. It's all well and good having all this commercial turnover, but when you allow people like Stephen Gent to be spunking it all up the wall on 3-year contracts on players who haven't done anything in their career, come to Bradford City, and surprise, surprise, don't really do much at Bradford City, that is why we are failing.
I think I've brought some excellent staff to the football club that will forever take it forward, and there's a strong blueprint to continue to grow Bradford City. Everyone is entitled to opinion, and I hold my hands up. I've made plenty of errors along the way. It was my first job as a chief executive. I'm bound to, but I don't apologise for trying to make us better, and I hope and I fully intend to deliver success on and off the field.
Just finally on this point, Ryan, this question from Anthony McNulty, and actually I think I'm fair in saying that this was a point that came up the most from the questions that we received since Friday. And it reads, have you discussed with Stefan Rupp, owner and chairman of Bradford City, the possibility of bringing in a director of football type figure to put plans and strategies in place and steer the identity of the club long term, i.e. beyond the reign of the current manager? No disrespect intended, Graham, it says in brackets. And what would your thoughts be on that matter?
It's a role that's been discussed many times, and that role can have many different titles. And as I've said, previous question, it's the same answer really. There's nothing I won't consider, haven't considered, and might consider in the future to make us better. And if strengthening that area of the club and that department is we feel a necessary step, then we'll take it. And we'll see where that goes. But we definitely all cards are always on the table, because at the end of the day, if you're not succeeding and putting the trophies in the cabinet season in, season out, there has to be some level of self-reflection. And we do that a lot. We constantly look at what we've done wrong and don't spend too much time thinking about what we might have done right.
Have you felt...
So that was pretty much not an answer to the question. It's pretty simple. Are you going to bring in a director of football? Yes or no? If it's no, which is the probable answer, then just be honest with the fans. We don't need to be going round and round in circles, saying a load of words, but not actually saying anything, which something Ryan Sparks is very good at. He says a lot of words, but you never really get much of an answer. He's gone, well, we've considered it in the past, we're currently considering it, we might consider it in the future, potentially, possibly. It's all well and good saying that, but just give us an answer. It's clear and obvious we need a director of football. Most of the fans can see that, so why can Ryan Sparks not see that? Is it his ego? I'm not so sure, but a director of football is number one priority for me, after obviously getting a number of these clowns out of the club.
Felt at any point that you might have needed that?
Not necessarily, no. I think
He doesn't necessarily think we need a director of football. Really? I go back to Jamie Rayner's point. Our average league position since you took over the football club is 12th. Clearly, the people you're appointing, the way we're recruiting is simply not good enough. We need a director of football, and a good one.
I think we had a huge void in recruitment when I took over in 2020. We were staring down the barrel of relegation, and we didn't have any idea how to sign players or what tools we could use to do that, and perhaps even how we could scout players. So I wanted to bring in head of recruitment. We changed the manager during that next season. We changed course, but we've returned to a model of having a head of recruitment and scouts, and we use facilities to support our scouting that the club never used before. Data analytics. We're a data-informed football club.
I think that's an interesting point because, 10, 15 years ago, this sort of information wasn't really available. It's only really been new information. Yes, we could have done it in maybe... I would hazard a guess that this sort of information came in the 2015 onwards, potentially that sort of time when, sports science and stats really became a big thing in football. But I wouldn't say it's exactly like a massive thing that this club hasn't had for 50 years, because it hasn't really been around for that long. But obviously it's a positive that we are now using that, because I think pretty much every football club is probably using it at this point.
And it does help us make the right decisions as often as possible in terms of who you bring in and then who you let go as well. So no, I don't think it's been a necessary step, and I think there are a number of examples across the Football League of where clubs have directors of football, and it doesn't necessarily give you a clear line to success either.
Well, yeah, that's very obvious, and it's all well and good saying that, but I'm sure there are a number of examples where there are director of footballs at the football club and they're succeeding. So it works both ways, really, doesn't it?
I think every club structure is different.
We'll move on to recruitment, given that that's a point of topic that we've just discussed there. This one's from Sam Mason, who has two questions, actually. What is the club's recruitment strategy. Summer 2022 seemed to be aimed at young players who could be developed and were sellable assets. Harry Lewis has left the club this window. Jake Young, there was a lot of talk about his future, both signed in that window, I think I'm right in saying. He says, we seem to have moved away from that. Is that deliberate? And the second part to his question, Stephen, I'll put this your way.
Yeah.
Do we scout the national leagues? Other EFL teams pick up excellent young players, but it's never been a market that we've seemed to dip into.
So in terms of the first one, in terms of the strategy, we have a balanced strategy. One, yes, we want to recruit young assets, like you just mentioned, Harry Lewis and Jake Young. Kavanagh has obviously recently joined the football club, but also to that as well, you know, we get big crowds at Bradford. We get 18,000 championship type crowds in League Two.
Them 18,000 crowds are not going to be relevant next season. I can assure you that. We'll be lucky if we get 12, 13,000 on average next season. We'll be nowhere near 18,000.
For younger players, that's sometimes really difficult. Not only for young players, but also senior players. So in terms of recruiting more experienced players, that was, you know, coming in, handling the pressure, playing for a big club. You know, wanting to achieve promotion, Richie Smallwood, your Kevin McDonald's, to name two. You know, these guys have played at the top level, have been promoted in leagues. Kevin McDonald's played at national level. That experience, you know, and know-how will rub off on the younger players anyway. So we've tried to keep it as, you know, as balanced as what we could. But we will continue to develop, bring players in, younger players, into the squad. But we're obviously, when we sat and had a chat with Graham, you know, for first and foremost, he wants a span of his team to be experienced, you know, and rightly so, because of the nature of Bradford City. Sorry, what was the second question?
And the second question, I think it might have been the first actually, but what is the club's recruitment? No, it's not a problem. I think you might have answered them both there, really. Yeah. Club's recruitment strategy, what is it? Sellable assets doesn't seem to be that way. And then the second part was, do we scout the national leagues?
Yes, we do. We are obviously, myself and a number of a small team of scouts throughout the country. We also have Y Scout and StatsBomb. Which
one thing I would like to touch on here is he said we've got a small scouts team, but why is Stephen Gent at nearly enough every single Bradford City home game? Why is he scouting players we've already signed? That really doesn't make sense to me, to be honest with you. Well, I don't understand why he needs to be there. Go out and scout other players, not ours.
Obviously, video analysis plus data informers as well. So we're open to everything, really. Listen, there's a lot of talent in the National League, but them clubs want to keep hold of the talent. Same with us with Jake Young, and they come at a cost. So listen, we're always looking for these gems. I feel we have signed some really good gems. I think, you know, Harry Lewis being the standout.
So he mentions Harry Lewis there, but I would say it's pretty obvious Harry Lewis was signed because of Mark Hughes' connection to Southampton. That's where I would say Harry Lewis was signed from, not from Stephen Gent going all the way down to Southampton and watching some of the games that he played, or 3 years ago when he was on loan at Dundee United. I think that one right there is a Mark Hughes addition, but I could be wrong, and if I am, I'll hold my hands up, but I would be inclined to disagree with Stephen Gent there.
You know, so, and we'll continue to search and do that.
Jake Howard asks quite simply, why did you sell Harry Lewis to Carlisle?
Do you want me to answer
that? I'll go and you can chip in if you want. No so listen, Harry was fantastic, you know, for us as a goalkeeper. Did fantastically well last season. I think it's well documented that we had a lot of interest for him, you know, in the summer, from a League One club, and then, you know, this season he's out of contract. He would have been out of contract, you know.
He had the option of a further year. You know, the club have banged on about having these options of further years, and every player's got one apart from Harry Chapman and Matty Platt, but they would have one if we got promoted.
In the summer.
Was there an option?
There was an option in our favour.
Yep.
We were made a bid of a significant amount of money.
See, so the rumoured fee for Harry Lewis was £175,000, and it came from a pretty reliable source, I would say. £175,000 is not a significant fee for Harry Lewis. I would have been looking at minimum £200,000. I know that this season he's had a little bit of a down year, but he's clearly a very, very talented goalkeeper and much better than Sam Walker, certainly from what I've seen so far.
And we felt I think you touched on finances and stuff in earlier questions. And having a succession plan, we felt it was good for business, and that's why, because then we can obviously use that. Ryan mentioned player trading, that was part of it. Harry's been fantastic. He's a great guy. I think I was a little bit emotional. I think it was my first signing for Bradford City as a head of recruitment, so it wasn't easy for me. We shared a couple of texts, and but listen, I hope he goes on and has a fantastic career. He was excellent for us last season.
All I would add to that is actually just in general about recruitment. I mean, I've been here for a number of windows, and it's always been at times quite difficult to change a squad and trade players, and to come into this January window and have multiple offers for different players, more than the documented players, if you like, was a really pleasant surprise. And the fact that we were sat, mid-table at that point going into January, and to have those kind of offers coming in for players fills me with a great deal of optimism going forward. It's clearly value in the squad, and that's really important. And it's part of the task I set Stephen when he joined us was I need you to help us we have great value in our academy. We don't necessarily carry it at first team level, and if there was a season where we were very unsuccessful, or for any reason we wanted to build a massive budget for the season after to achieve something different in a different league, perhaps we need to be in a position where we can potentially work like Peterborough sometimes, where they are.
We're never ever going to be a club like Peterborough because we don't have that initial investment to get the really good young players. Like we had, I'm pretty sure this is well documented, we had the opportunity to sign Ephron Mason-Clark, who has since moved on to Coventry City, and instead we signed Theo Robinson because we didn't have enough money. So we're never ever going to be like Peterborough because we haven't got the money and the finances to be able to do so. You also mentioned there about having a really talented academy with a lot of value in it, but not much in the first team. So why do we keep signing wasted loans like Chisholm Afoka and Rayhan Tulloch, who are pretty much blocking the development of some of our better young players? There has been the odd game this season where Bobby Poynton, one of our own, has not been able to play because someone like a Rayhan Tulloch's getting minutes ahead of him. Why are we not developing our own players if our academy is as good as what the club keep banging on it about it is? It's another baffling decision, really.
Are in a position at times where they cash in on some of their work, and that's why conversations me and Stephen had about Ireland. Can we work in Ireland? Absolutely, we can. Let's sign Kieran Kelly from Bohemians. The first time we've done that, so in my time at the club, and just to step outside of England was a start. We signed Adam Wilson from a Welsh club. We're constantly looking around, as far as we can. We talk about players abroad as well, and I think that's been exciting for us, and I just to have, I wish I would echo what Stephen said about Harry. Great boy, huge talent, deserved his opportunity to play in League One.
We are hurtling through this hour. It is a Bradford City fans forum here on BBC Radio Leeds, a West Yorkshire Sport daily special with you until 7 o'clock tonight. First team manager Graham Alexander, club chief executive Ryan Sparks, and head of recruitment Stephen Gent with us in our BBC Radio Leeds studios. Graham, I promise there are some questions coming your way. It isn't just for Ryan and Stephen. But look, some of the big talking points, as I'm sure you're all aware, are off the field matters. But there are some corkers for you as well, Graham, so they'll come your way shortly. Christian Bell says to Stephen, you might have been expecting this one, Stephen, I am concerned about the level of scouting at the club, as a large amount of our signings seems to have links to Middlesbrough, where you previously worked. What is the process at the club for scouting, and why aren't we looking into the National League more often? Now, you've answered that part of the question, but to address the Middlesbrough point there.
Yeah, so I've had this a few times, and we've up until recently we've only signed one player directly from Middlesbrough.
Yeah, but that's not the question. It's about links to Middlesbrough. Half the team basically has had a link to Middlesbrough, where obviously he's previously worked, so he will have known the player or known of the player. You know what I mean? It's all well and good saying that, we've only signed one or two players directly from Middlesbrough, but when nearly half your team have played for Middlesbrough in some way, shape or form, or from Middlesbrough, or that sort of area, I feel like that is when cause for concern can be raised.
You know, I think in my time we've signed 35 players so far in my time at Bradford. I think 7 have a connection with Middlesbrough, so is that 20%?
It's fifth, yeah.
The fifth, it's 20%, yeah.
That's still a high percentage.
So that's the facts.
Yeah.
Listen, we'll scout everywhere. We've been over to Ireland, we're looking in Wales, we'll look everywhere. Obviously, from my previous time, I know some of the players. Obviously, I don't know them. I didn't, apart from Richie Small, I didn't know the other guys personally. But Alex Patterson, when we signed him in the summer, he had a range of League One and League Two clubs, SPL clubs chasing him.
And Patterson on paper was a very good signing. It's just unfortunately we've been unable to keep him fit. He's had 3 or 4 long-term hamstring injuries now. I think is it 3 long-term hamstring injuries. So then maybe you've got to look at potentially the sports science, the physio sort of department at the football club, because Patterson, I still believe, will be a really, really successful player at this football club, and he has been a big loss for us so far this season in the games that he hasn't played. But it's so underwhelming that you sign in the summer what was probably our best signing, and he's barely been able to kick a ball so far this season. But me personally, I don't really have too much of a problem with the signing players from Middlesbrough sort of connection, because a lot of them have actually been pretty decent, if I'm honest. Smallwood overall, I would say, has been positive. Harry Chapman had his injury problems, but he's a good player at this level. And there's some other ones that I can't exactly remember off the top of my head. But I'll let Stephen Gent continue here.
And I'm not going to be put off by the fact that he used to be, in Middlesbrough's academy. I want to sign good players for this football club, and if there's a connection with Middlesbrough or not, But I think, listen, I don't just, I'm not just looking at Middlesbrough connected players. Trust me.
Final question on recruitment. It actually ties into a further question that we had on fitness. This one's from David Mann, who says, in your time at the club, several of the players signed seem to have underlying medical conditions. What are your criteria for nominating players? Does Graham have different requirements to Mark Hughes? And then just on the fitness side of things, because it might tie into that question somewhat, and this one's for Ryan. Do you think we need to change physio and fitness staff? Players look unfit, and we have at least one crocked player, in their words, every year for years. They mentioned Jake Reeves, Abo Issa, Jamie Walker this season, Leanne Gold from seasons gone by, and Alex Patterson, a player that Stephen mentioned there. Stephen, if you've answer that question first, and then we'll lead on to Ryan.
Listen, we
I'm
want
listening.
players who are fit, physically fit, and who can handle 50 games, in a season. Have we took risk with certain players before? Yes, because we believe that the good players. Injuries happen in sport, but we want to minimise that risk.
But the problem is, say Jamie Walker, for example, very good player, misses normally 40, 50, 60% of the season, or certainly has done in his time at Bradford City, and I'm pretty sure he's quite injury prone at Hearts. For the money he's on, would it not be better to go out and get someone who's going to be more robust? You look at players like Brad Halliday, Alex Gilliard, Richie Small. These are players who are fit and available near enough every single week without fail. Gilliard, I think, had a thigh problem at the start of the season, which kept him out for maybe 2 or 3 weeks. But apart from that, them three, you look at players like, your centre-halves are traditionally always going to be fit and available. But even last season, Romney Critchlow had a fair few injuries. But traditionally, they're the sort of players who are going to be available all the time. But apart from that, all the other players always seem to pick up some sort of a niggle or an injury, which keeps them out for a couple of weeks every single season. Like right now, Tyreek Wright not going to be available for Wrexham. Jake Young probably not going to be available for Wrexham as well. And there's clearly some sort of issue at the football club.
Obviously. But no, we don't intentionally go out to sign players who are so-called sort of injury prone. We want to sign them, and particularly, having the conversations with Graham and Chris over the number of weeks. And the way we, preparing for the summer is we want fit and available players. So that is part of that. Listen, injuries happen. Sometimes, yeah. If a player's got an injury history, but quite frankly, we medical them. Everyone comes in who has a medical, and then we look at, take the advice of the guys. I'm sure the guys won't mention me saying this, but there was a situation in January we could have signed a striker, but then it was flagged up by our medical staff about he's had this injury. Their advice was, I don't think we should, because they could re-injure. and then them players are no good to us if they're not on the no good to Graham or us if they're not on the if they're not on the field. So we decided as a club that we won't take this one. And
I know it sounds like pretty common sense to not sign a player who's injured or probably going to get injured again, but credit to the football club for not signing an injured player, because we've signed so many injury-prone players over the last couple of seasons.
And but our medical staff are really good. They're really frank and honest.
I think in complete fairness to you there, Stephen, the players that I mentioned there, only Alex Patterson is actually one that you've signed. The other ones that I mentioned, Jake Reeves, Aboisa, Jamie Walker, Lee Angle, they all sit outside of your time at the football club at head of recruitment. But it goes on to that next question, which comes from Adam Beecroft. It was something else that was mentioned by Mark Williams as well, for those that got in touch. Do you think, Ryan, that we need to change physio and fitness staff? The players look unfit, and as they said, we have had at least one crop player every year for years.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, this, because when I took over, I had a conversation with Chris Royston, who was now at Rotherham, of course, was headhunted in the summer for his work last season. And we discussed a model around performance and injury analysis. And in the season prior to that, we had spent £125,000 on medical bills, which is it was the second worst in the division, and it's the only league table that you want to finish bottom of, if that makes sense. We finished second, first, third, etc. And I look back actually over the last 10 years, and it had been an issue at the club, right? Even with, I think, the exception of one season, it had been an issue. So I tasked the guys with, can we try and finish bottom of this league table going forward? And our spend last year was 35,000. So what the enhancements, the changes, the way we look after the players, the preparation, recruitment's a massive part of that, as you've said, because if you sign players who've got an injury record, they're probably going to get injured. And this season we're in the 20s, and we've had a couple of injuries. So it's actually an area that of focus. And we have made changes to them areas actually in recent years to make them better, because ultimately our job is to put a staff there for the manager to make sure he's got the availability of the players as often as possible.
So we are 30 minutes into this fans forum. We're over halfway through it, and that's probably the first positive thing to come out of it. Credit to the football club, because that actually sounds like something that has positively changed, which is obviously good news, and hopefully that does continue, because, like, obviously if them stats are true, which I would assume that they are, being able to reduce our spend on medical bills is obviously a very positive thing. So it's great to see that half an hour in, we finally got some positive news coming out of this fans forum.
Even if that sometimes means that players have to sit out a week or two just to make sure we don't have a problem. And we're trying to be medically aware. Science was not something that we were massively talking about in 2020-21. COVID doesn't help that, but I felt we needed to focus on it. And medically, we were just kind of coasting along. And recruitment, we perhaps weren't looking as hard as we should have done. So we've made it a huge part of Stephen's role. And it's a true story what Stephen tells you. We walked away from a player two days before deadline day because we felt we couldn't. And we did that for the right reasons.
You can understand the frustration, can't you? I'm sure it's a frustration for Graham 100%. As well, when Tyreek Wright comes in and he's had 60 minutes Absolutely. And he's got a hamstring problem and the likes of that.
And look, Tyreek's somewhat undercut with not playing at Plymouth. We knew that was going to be a risk, and then we have a really harsh night at Doncaster where one of our players, again against Doncaster, is injured and gets a fracture in his leg that we're trying to get right now. And then
a fracture in his leg. Sorry, did we not know that? I didn't personally know that. I knew he'd had some sort of bruising on his leg, but another player having a significant leg injury due to Doncaster Rovers, and they were banging on about our players being thugs when their players were injuring themselves in the AFL Trophy a couple of weeks ago. So, I mean, a fracture in the leg, I don't know how serious that was, but it sounds probably like it's probably going to be season ending for Jamie Walker. Brilliant, absolutely fantastic news. So we'd gone from having a slight positive there in terms of the medical bills have been reduced to one of the best players is probably going to miss the rest of the season because a fracture in the leg, not exactly a 2-week fix, is it?
The same night, Alex Patterson is injured again. I think Alex's surgery, which we've invested in, should reduce the potential for re-injury by about 80%. So we're trying to make sure Alex Patterson's ready to go and he's going to be good to go next season. But there potentially are some issues around conditioning. There's various reasons for that of certain players who've been out for longer, didn't do much in pre-season because we're carrying injuries, etc. But it's all areas are reviewed constantly. There's definitely no relaxation of
No
"Well,
stone
we made the playoffs last year, so
unturned."
everything's great. That's not ever part of our language, and certainly not where we're sat in the league at the moment.
Right, there we go then. So we've gone through part 1 there. This video is obviously going to be uploaded. Part 2 should be out pretty much straight away, all being well. It might be like 5 or 10 minutes difference. But yeah, thank you all for watching part 1. Make sure to like, comment and subscribe. Get your thoughts in down in the comment section down below. And I'll see you all very soon for part number 2.